My fusion system, fusing 1,000 chickens at the start. Chapter 191, A Purge and a Fusion. Architecture, ancient ruins of the Tudor dynasty. Background, an ancient building that was more than 1,200 years old. The interior of the building was buried with a platinum tier mage of the Tudor dynasty and more than 10,000 people. Due to the effects of some mysterious ritual, any living creature that had been exposed to the building for a long time would be transformed into an undead creature. Danger level, apart from the platinum tier mage, there are also various triggering spells, such as poisonous smoke, quicksand, and dark arrows. The undead creatures will forever guard the platinum tier mage's treasures. Anyone who tries to break in will become a pile of feces. As long as they don't break in, they will be safe. Watson's eyes were filled with information about the ruins that were buried in the dirt. He chose not to enter the ruins for the reasons stated above and because the system indicated that as long as he did not enter, there would be no danger. Then, he asked Sven, "Is there anything wrong with my mining method?" "It seems, there's nothing wrong." Sven's mouth twitched as though he did not know what to say. Exploring the ruins, in his opinion, meant entering the ruins to obtain treasures. Otherwise, how could it be termed an exploration? Those who claimed to be adventurers did so, as did the heroes and authors of adventure tales. No one did as Watson had done, he had moved the entire ruins. However, after careful consideration, Watson's method was not an issue. They could investigate the ruins whenever they wished if they moved the ruins. They were unafraid of the dangers inside, thanks to Black Moon Castle's power. No one had done it because the adventurers were not as strong as Watson, and powerful people despised doing such a thing. Sven, the astrologer, Nightingale, and a few shadow guards stared at Watson with an odd look on their faces. They had followed Watson into the ruins to discover what was inside and report back to the border count at the border. Watson's actions had entirely destroyed their hopes. Well, that issue with this ruin is solved. Sven, do you know any other ruins nearby? Watson had directed more than 20 giant rock golems to dig out the inverted pyramid from the crevices in the ground in less than 10 minutes. The 100-meter-tall giants were hauling hundreds of meters of magnificent buildings. They broke all the trees along the road, leaving massive pothole-like tracks on the ground. Watson continued with his questions as they walked deeper into the forest. He wanted to dig more ruins and study them when they returned to the castle. "Watson, hold on." Nightingale stopped Watson, who wanted to leave the vast ruins, and said, "Why did you bring us here? It feels like we can't help you with anything. If you had planned to do that from the beginning, wouldn't it be better if you came here yourself? I'm not blaming you. At least tell me the purpose of bringing so many magical beasts in us." She knew Watson was not a person who did things for no reason, but she did not understand Watson's specific thoughts. She felt like she was there to see a show. "Do not worry, Miss Nightingale. You will understand why I brought you and those magical beasts here soon." "Sven, you have not answered my question," Watson said with a curious smile. "Do you know any other nearby ruins?" "I apologize, young Master Watson. I really don't know about that." Sven shook his head. The ruins were a coincidence. Even though the legendary Misty Forest had many ancient ruins, there were magical beasts everywhere. Furthermore, most of the ruins were hidden in difficult-to-detect places, making it tricky to find them. "What do you think, Master?" When the astrologer noticed Watson's gaze, he snorted and replied, "Do not ask me. I have been staying in the Star Temple and am unfamiliar with the border. Of course, I don't know much about the ruins here." Watson finally turned his gaze to Nightingale and the shadow guards. If any ruins were discovered in the Misty Forest, they would have been exploited long ago by the border count's subordinates. They would not have waited until then, and even if there were excavated antiquities, they presumably would not have notified him. "In that case, I can only rely on myself." Watson sighed. "Miss Nightingale, weren't you wondering why I brought so many magical beasts with us?" I'll tell you now. He whistled to the 100,000 magical beasts as soon as he finished speaking. The sound traveled far and wide thanks to his combat aura. The magical beasts sprang from the ground and fled in all directions. They vanished quickly. Don't tell me you intend to utilize those magical beasts to help you find the ruins, Watson, Nightingale exclaimed. Miss Nightingale, you have figured out what I am trying to say so quickly. Yes, that's what I want to do. The magical beasts he had fused were his eyes and ears. He could let those magical beasts search the misty forest. Of course, the misty forest was very vast. It was not enough to rely on just 100,000 magical beasts. Watson was prepared to fuse all the remaining magical beasts in the forest. That approach could fully eradicate the magical beasts in the misty forest. People at the border would no longer be afraid of winter. Not only can I obtain the magical beasts and increase my strength, but I can also excavate the ruins. At the same time, I can also remove the problem with winter and make everyone at the border thank me. I don't know how many I can kill in one go. Watson pondered to himself, and the corners of his mouth curled upward to expose a smirk that indicated he had devised a strategy. Young Master Watson, you exceed my expectations every time. Sven took a deep breath. He had come here to see a few Demoness bandit gang leaders doing well in Black Moon Castle recently. He did not want to be inferior to his rivals from the past, so he handed the ruins to claim credit in front of Watson. His ideas had diminished considerably by that point. He was more interested in seeing how far Watson could go. What type of miracle would that brilliant adolescent, whom even the astrologer admired, would achieve? Time whizzed by. Watson had been in the misty forest for a week. When compared to a week ago, the misty forest has changed dramatically. The undulating hills had all vanished, replaced by a few towering mountains that stretched into the clouds. They were like colossal pillars that had no end in sight. Watson had fused most of the hills in the misty forest because he felt the magical beasts were too slow in searching for the ruins, and the rocky mountain paths were difficult for them to traverse. The mountain range not only increased in height after the fusion, but the material was also different from before that. It glowed with platinum-colored light, and any rock that fell would be platinum tier. Watson resolved to encircle those mountains in the future. It would become the quarry for Black Moon Castle, and those rocks would last for decades. Watson also fused the plants on the summit and at the mountain's base because they obstructed his view. Watson heaped up the medicinal herbs that transformed into silver or gold tier herbs in another location, which would become Black Moon Town's future medicinal herb base. It was not an exaggeration to state that a person could eat the medical herbs there for several years. It was worth noting that among the medicinal herbs he had fused was a gold tier fruit called the ice essence. That was everyone's primary source of food for that week. The search for the ruins became much easier after Watson modified Misty Forest's terrains. Watson had identified and excavated more than a dozen entrances to the probable ruins in less than a week. Those ruins ranged from 500 to thousands of years. He transported them away with the help of the giant rock golems. There was not a single modification when the majority of the ruins were unearthed. It was not a surprise. There was no odd movement when the ruins were buried under the ground. They would not touch any mechanisms until they were entirely excavated. Of course, there would be no strange motions. The owners of all the ruins would not have thought that such a person would exist in the future. That person would dig out the entire ruins instead of entering them during their exploration. Only a minor fraction of the ruins were relocated. There were magical beasts that fled the place in fear. They were also easily handled by Watson and the astrologer, both of whom were at platinum tier. They had spent a week together, and Watson had carried out a great purge and fusion in the misty forest. The value he had gained was far beyond his imagination. At that moment, Watson stood in the deepest part of the misty forest, adjacent to the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. He commanded a few giant rock golems to excavate a vast ruin embedded in that mountain. Chapter 192, The Border Count's Arrival. The Dragonspine Snow Mountain, which resembled a lengthy dragon, spanned for an unknown number of kilometers. It separated the Holy Dragon Kingdom from the Winter Nation. Watson's excavated ruins were embedded in the snow mountain. They were not embedded but instead were frozen inside. The fog in the misty forest behind Watson had essentially dissipated as he stood at the foot of the mountain. The only thing visible was sparse and bare branches, as well as vacant land that stretched as far as the eye could see. Over 300,000 magical beasts scurried around. The weakest of those magical beasts was Silver Tear, while the strongest had a Gold Tear aura. Watson's previous week resulted in those magical beasts. Almost all magical beasts in the forest had been merged. Those beasts would no longer be a threat to the people at the border but would instead serve as Black Moon Castle's guardians. Watson had no idea how powerful Black Moon Castle had become. He reckoned that it would not be difficult to sweep across half of the border. He also had no idea where to put so many magical beasts. He thought it would be a waste to fuse them with Emperor Cluck and the Golden Flash. Furthermore, the daily food intake for such an enormous number of magical beasts was astronomical. It was a headache. Watson was well aware of the fusion system's flaws. It was too powerful. If one were overly powerful, it could sometimes produce problems. Watson gazed ahead, his thoughts calmed. A massive blue ice sculpture appeared on the mountainside in front of him. The ice sculpture had been around for an unknown amount of time. It seemed to be a magical stone. Its hardness was not at all inferior to that of platinum tier metal. A dark cave could be seen behind the ice sculpture, and its walls were covered in mysterious symbols. If I am not mistaken, those symbols should be runes from the Lone language, which existed over 10,000 years ago. Those runes were thought to be the words left behind by the gods in ancient times. It is thought that after completely interpreting them, one will discover the gods' secrets. I can only say that I have a basic comprehension of these runes. The astrologer remarked emotionally as he looked at the runes in front of him. Watson had initially taken him to the misty forest to excavate the ruins. He merely wanted to aid his adorable apprentice to carry out his plan to fortify Black Moon Castle. However, as Watson investigated the ruins one by one, he got increasingly drawn to those ancient ruins. It piqued his interest to explore them. The writings of the gods, the ancient ruins from 10,000 years ago. Nightingale's eyes shone as she gazed upon the old ruins in front of her. Those were priceless treasures. If they could be unearthed, the border count's power would undoubtedly be increased by many levels. The gods might have left some treasures behind too. They had been in the misty forest for a week, and she had not been idle over that week. She not only assisted Watson in excavating the ruins, but she also gathered information and used sophisticated techniques to relay it to the border count. She had planned to wait for Watson to retrieve the items from the ruins before she would pick out the essential locations and report them to the border count. However, after she saw Watson uproot the ruins, she realized that she could not possibly know what was in it. She might as well tell everything that transpired there to the border count and let him make his own decision. She calculated the time in her head. It looked like the border count would arrive soon. I am not sure how to get into the ruins. The magical stone at the entryway appears to be enchanted with self-destruction magic. If it is forcefully destroyed, the entire ruins will be obliterated. The astrologer spoke again. Sven, who was beside him, asked curiously, "You are very knowledgeable, Lord Astrologer. Don't you have a solution?" "Even though I know that language, I can't think of a good solution for the time being." The astrologer shook his head, a concerned expression on his face. He was not omnipotent, and an ancient god had left behind that ruin. Watson stared at the ruin in front of him while the astrologer thought about it. The corresponding information appeared in his eyes. Building, the ruin of an ancient god civilization. An ancient structure dating back 10,000 years, in which some unknown creatures are sleeping. The ruins are etched with the Lone letters, which appear to be an incomplete magical formation. The hard ice at the entrance seems to be the result of a platinum tier spell, Absolute Zero. The mystical explosion within will be triggered by violent demolition. Danger level, unknown. Those lone characters depict magic? Not bad. Watson stroked his chin. He did not know any lone characters, but the system could understand them. As he pondered that, the astrologer next to him talked to Sven. Sven inquired as to what was written on it. The astrologer stated that the runes could represent records of ancient gods' life. Watson was well aware that it was not the case. His master's comments about deciphering the runes appeared to be an exaggeration, but he did not expose him. Watson's eyes reflected the magic stone at the door, as well as the writing on the wall. Magic stone with the absolute zero spell, releases extreme cold that can freeze time, causing platinum tier large-scale damages. The magic carved on the cave walls was a spell called the Frozen World's Silver Moon, but unfortunately, it was incomplete. Incomplete spell. The Frozen World's Silver Moon summons a moon, and the space covered by the moonlight will be frozen. The incomplete spell was a platinum tier spell. It was hard to imagine the spell's effect in its complete form. Perhaps it was a diamond tier spell. Watson could only think that to himself. Then, he heard the system's notification sound. A spell that can be fused has been detected. Would you like to fuse it? Fuse. When Watson chose to fuse it, the massive magical stone in front of him began to vibrate. The astrologer's expression changed abruptly. What did you do, Watson? This is not good. The magic stored in that stone is going to erupt. Everyone. We have to go now. Even an astrologer as powerful as him could not keep calm because it was an ancient god's ruins. Sven, Nightingale, and the others' expressions also changed, and they stepped back without hesitation. Only Watson waved his hand calmly. Master, everyone, please don't panic. I have removed the magic here. It's fine. The magic stone collapsed at a rapid speed as soon as he spoke. The absolute zero spell contained within the stone was not released. Instead, they morphed into enigmatic symbols that floated through the air. The words on the cave wall also disappeared and turned into mysterious glowing substances. They fused with the symbols from the absolute zero spell and entered Watson's body. Congratulations, Master, for obtaining the Silver Moon of Endless Reincarnation, a peak platinum tier spell that can summon an illusory moon. Any creature touched by the moonlight will be sucked into its body and soul, forever imprisoned within the spell. The more flesh and soul it absorbs, the more powerful the spell will be. There is no upper limit. There is no upper limit to that spell. Watson blinked, there was a strange expression on his face. That was the first time he had heard of such a spell. Would that spell make someone infinitely stronger? Could an Iron Tier elite kill a Platinum Tier warrior? That should not be the case. Watson did not experiment with that spell. Instead, he cast a Platinum Tier Earth Elemental spell and summoned a giant rock golem in front of everyone's astonished eyes. He was ready to excavate the ruins. There are already 2 types of spells carved on the outside, and more might have been carved on the interior. Won't we make a fortune if we transfer the entire ruins? Those were all magic left over from the era of the gods. Perhaps they would find many more lost spells that no longer existed. The ruins are connected to the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. If you dig it out so rashly, it might trigger an avalanche on the top of the mountain. Aren't you afraid of that? An unexpected voice echoed from behind Watson just as he was about to enter the ruins. When he looked around, he spotted a man with purple hair and sharp ears. His face was so beautiful that it did not look like a human's, and he was expressing himself with a mix of humor and seriousness. The man fixed an incomprehensible and scrutinizing look on him. It made his hair stand on end. Even though that was the first time Watson had seen the man, he knew that he must be the so-called Fairies Count, who was also the Border Count, Lord Sylvan. Chapter 193, Watson could not accept it. Sylvan felt distressed. He received a letter from Nightingale about 3 days ago while he was in Fairy Castle. A flying elemental magical beast delivered it. The letter stated that Watson had taken the astrologers to explore the misty forest and had uncovered many ruins. Black Moon Town was also recruiting refugees. They had more than 100,000 people under their protection. That amounted to around 1/10 of the total number of refugees at the border. Many people who knew about it appreciated Black Moon Castle's good deeds, and some people in Fairy Castle even praised them. The following were the maids' conversations that Sylvan overheard on the way to the toilet. One maid said, "I heard that a new power, Black Moon Castle, has appeared on the border and is recruiting refugees. If they joined them, they'd be safe from the magical beasts, and they can eat and drink for free too. I heard that the food there is better than the food in Fairy Castle." Then, another maid said, "Your news is outdated. According to what I heard, the food in the Black Moon Castle is not only better than the food cooked here, but the ingredients are also first class and expensive. They eat silver-tier magical beasts meat and ginseng of the same grade. That is a silver-tier ingredient. Even Lord Sylvan only eats it once during the festival." The first maid asked, "How do you know so much about Black Moon Castle?" The other maid replied, "A relative of mine was attacked by magical beasts during the winter and hid in Black Moon Castle. I just received a letter from her in the morning. She said she had gained 10 kilograms in Black Moon Castle in the past few days, and her strength had also changed from iron to bronze tier. I had wanted to bring her to Fairy Castle, but she refused to come now. She said Fairy Castle couldn't compare to Black Moon Castle. I'm really envious of her." That year's winter was different from usual. The magical beasts were not only exceptionally powerful, but they were also more intelligent. As the border count, Sylvan had to protect his territory and send men to save other manors on the border. Every year, that was a routine occurrence. Sylvan would dispatch troops to those manor owners in need. In exchange, the manor owners would provide Sylvan with money for protection. However, due to the arrival of Black Moon Castle that year, the manor owners returned all of the guards that he had sent them. It would be costly to seek Sylvan's assistance, but with Black Moon Castle, they would not only save money, but they would also be able to eat and drink for free. At first glance, the decision was obvious. Many manor owners even decided to demolish their manor and relocate their entire family nearer to Black Moon Castle. They would be neighbors with Watson once winter passed. The astrologer was very depressed but helpless about that. He had admitted to the astrologer that Watson was his son. It was not appropriate to suppress him at that time. Furthermore, Black Moon Castle had adopted a large number of refugees. If he acted rashly, it would only cause chaos among the people. One could only say that Watson had made a good move. He was concerned about how he would deal with Watson and Black Moon Castle. He was well aware that if the trend persisted, he would lose control of the border. However, there was no other option. Then, he received Nightingale's letter. He wanted to see how many ruins Watson had unearthed. He wanted a cut of the spoils. Then he would use identity as a father to urge Watson to be careful. It was simply ideal. That was what Sylvan had in mind as he dashed across the border. At that moment, Sylvan assessed the youth in front of him. He had brown wavy hair and eyes the color of the azure sea. His body released waves of magical elements as powerful as a platinum-tier elite. His arms and legs were also exceptionally strong, with explosive strength. One could see his attainments in body cultivation. Furthermore, Watson's physique had some kind of strange power that caused him to feel a sense of crisis. Watson was the only person who could threaten him across the entire border, other than the astrologer. Those who can be regarded as master's disciples are not ordinary individuals, as one might think. His skill may be even greater than mine if he can achieve such results at such a young age. He felt that way because of Watson and what he had seen and heard along the road that had made him nervous. Misty Forest's previously luxuriant trees had been hollowed out, and the hills had vanished, transformed into towering pillars. Only a barren plain connected to the Dragonspine Snow Mountain remained. The dense fog forest was rich in resources. Under normal circumstances, it would not be a problem to use it for hundreds of years. It was hard to imagine that someone could use a week to empty all the resources there. If he had not seen hundreds of thousands of magical beasts running on the plain, Sylvan might suspect that he had found the wrong place. Furthermore, those supernatural beasts were not typical creatures. They were at the very least silver tier, with tens of thousands of gold tier magical beasts amongst them. If those magical beasts were to be released, it would be an unspeakable calamity for the entire border. Even Fairy Castle's strength would be insufficient to stop them. All of those magical beasts obeyed Watson's commands, which made Sylvan ponder it. He had a grudge against the king, and revenge required strength, and those hundreds of thousands of magical beasts would undoubtedly be of great help to him. With a meaningful expression in his eyes, Sylvan smiled and patted Watson's shoulder. As I've just told you, Watson, if the ruins in the Dragonspine Snow Mountain are excavated hastily, the mountain may collapse and trigger an avalanche. The only solution is to employ magic to fill the excavated area. And I happen to be very good at earth elemental spells, so please allow me to assist you as a father. Sylvan said the word father loudly. He reminded Watson not to resist him and to pay heed to his identity. His identity as a father? Watson scratched his head and looked confused. Who was Sylvan's child? Why would he tell him that? He even deliberately emphasized it. Was his child amongst his group of men? Watson looked around and finally saw Nightingale. She was the only one who echoed the characteristics of Sylvan's child. Nightingale is the Border Count's child. Well, it's not impossible. Watson stroked his chin. Even though Sylvan looked young, probably about 30 years old, the elves' bloodline was different from humans. Elves could live for a long time, and their appearance would hardly change. While Watson pondered that, the astrologer walked forward. At first, he glared at Watson angrily, as if he blamed Watson for taking matters into his own hands. Then, he turned to look at Sylvan. Your sense of smell is really sharp, Sylvan. I did not intend to tell you that. So, who told you? If I'm not wrong, it must be Miss Nightingale, right? Nightingale dropped her head in embarrassment after the astrologer called her out. Sylvan, on the other hand, appeared unconcerned. Master, I have complete command over the border. Is there anything I shouldn't know about this? After all, we're a family. I came to check on the progress of the exploration of the ruins and to provide a hand. What is the problem? He emphasized the word family. Fine. You are, after all, his father. I will not meddle in your family matters. The astrologer waved his hand. But you came at the right time. I don't know what kind of danger is in those 10,000-year-old ruins. I was worried, but with your help, there should be no problem. Don't worry, Master. I'll do my best. If we discover any treasure in there, I only want 3/10 of it. As for the other ruins that have been excavated, I want 1/10. Do you have any objections, Master? Sylvan raised a finger. He thought he was already very generous. It would be unreasonable not to give him some benefits when they excavated the ruins right under his nose. The astrologer nodded. I have no objections. Suddenly, a young voice echoed from the side. I have an objection. Watson raised his hand. Of course, he had an objection. He painfully excavated all of those ruins. The process may not be complex, but the Border Count did nothing, and he wanted to share the benefits. Why? Who was Nightingale's father? Chapter 194, The Battle with the Border Count. You have an opinion about that, Watson? Sylvan narrowed his eyes. His expression did not change, but his eyes were filled with danger. My opinion is that Lord Sylvan should go back to where he came from. We don't need your help to excavate the ruins. These ruins belong to Black Moon Castle. I won't give you even a single hair, let alone 1/10 of it. Watson spoke with a puffed chest. If it were in the past, he might have admitted defeat when he saw the Border Count. Back then, he did not have the strength, but things had changed. Even without the help of the astrologer, he could still fight against Sylvan with his 2 peak platinum tier items. Hiss! Those powerful words caused a great uproar. Nightingale and the shadow guards did not say anything, they stared at Watson in shock. Sven also opened his mouth and then laughed. He could not even say such words to Sylvan. It clearly did not leave Sylvan with any dignity, but it seemed like something Watson would do. The astrologer could not do anything, he just shook his head. In his opinion, it was a quarrel between father and son. The two of them were family, so it would be the same if any one of them excavated the ruins. He did not expect that Watson would not even address Sylvan as a father, he addressed him as the border count. It seemed very distant. After he thought about it carefully, he figured it was not a surprise. After all, Sylvan had left him in someone else's home. I am a tolerant person, but I can get angry too. The corners of Sylvan's mouth twitched. The price of enduring my anger is terrifying. Watson, I will give you another chance. Take the initiative to hand in 30% of the things that you have already excavated. Also, to prevent the magical beasts from harming the border, you must hand them to me for management. Watson had previously gotten the astrologer to hint at him that he wanted to become his illegitimate child. He had cooperated and admitted to that and had even given him many gifts. Why would Watson refuse him when he asked for some benefits? That child must not know what was good for him. Sylvan decided to teach him a lesson. Watson was also enraged. Sylvan had presented him with a bunch of trash. He had given him a platinum tier item, but Watson had to use the world tree's branches to fuse a new one. Then, the man came and asked for too many benefits. He did not only want treasures from the ruins but the magical beasts as well. Watson thought it was too much of an ask. The hundreds of thousands of silver-tier magical beasts and the treasures in the ruins were worth more than tens of millions of gold coins. Those were not comparable to the gift of 200,000 gold coins that the border count had given him. Lord Sylvan, what if I don't agree with that? Well, if you want to bear my anger, you'll have to pay a huge price. The best method to deal with disobedient children is to beat them up. Only when their body is in pain will they realize what they can and cannot do. Sylvan's face was solemn as he spoke. He extended his right hand toward Watson. There were 5 rings on his fingers, and they were lit at that point. I already gave you 5 rings. Return those 5 rings to me because you go against my wishes. He had only given Watson 5 of those rings because he had left a special magical imprint on them. He could summon them back from Watson at any time. After all, they were platinum tier items, and they were extremely precious to him. He had never intended to give them to Watson in the first place. As he moved, the light from the rings on his fingers spread out and fused into his body. It caused his aura to become 5 times stronger. At the same time, Watson's body moved with it, but there was no reaction after only one move. Hey! Sylvan was taken aback. According to the magic he had engraved on them, the rings should have left Watson's body and returned to his hands by then. He could only make one wish with the Nibelung rings. Watson would have no choice but to comply as long as he wished for him to submit to him. There was also a gap among platinum tier elites. Someone like him could kill Watson easily. The prerequisite was to summon the ring. Hey? Where are my rings? Why aren't they reacting? Not only could the ring not be detected, but neither could the magical imprint that he had left behind. Sylvan's magic gestures toward Watson continued to shift. He was perplexed as to what had happened. Did Watson not have those rings on him? That should not be the case. Even if the rings were not with him, he would still be able to find them as long as they were within the border. Unless... Are you looking for this? Watson had no choice but to take a battle stance when he realized Sylvan was ready to attack him. Sylvan, however, surprised him by not releasing any powerful magic. Instead, for some unfathomable reason, he gestured toward him. He stretched his palm outward after staring at it for a moment. A branch grew from his hand, and a dazzling, wriggling ring hung from it. This is... Sylvan's demeanor shifted. He could sense that the ring Watson wore had the same aura as the Nibelung rings, but it was not the same. This is a peak platinum tier tool that I created after I fused the 5 Nibelung rings. It's the wish for the world ring, Watson explained casually. Are you joking? Sylvan looked doubtful. Nightingale had told him that Watson had perfected a fusion skill that could fuse 2 weapons to boost their quality. On the other hand, the Nibelung rings were platinum tier items, and it was too heaven-defying to fuse a weapon of that level. It's true. I can attest to that. The ring Watson created is platinum tier, and it's even stronger than the previous Nibelung rings. You can make 3 wishes, and each wish would only cost half of the price, the astrologer's voice boomed from somewhere nearby. 3 wishes? Sylvan's mouth opened slightly. An ability to make 3 wishes at half price was equivalent to 6 times the effect of the Nibelung rings. He did not know how Watson did it or if the astrologer had helped him. His master might have helped the child. Sylvan found solace in his heart. His master had given him the Nibelung rings, and no one knew it better than his master. If the astrologer had modified that ring, it would not be surprising if he could make 3 wishes. Of course, it was not the time to think about that. He thought of a severe problem. Watson had fused a new ring, so the 5 rings in his hand could no longer form a perfect Nibelung ring. As if to test his idea, Watson's voice echoed from the other side. Lord Sylvan, please don't be so stingy with your next gift. It would be better if you gave me a complete item, or else I would have to fuse it myself. Now that I've fused the rings, you won't be able to use your other 5 Nibelung rings anymore. Ignorant brat, shut up. Sylvan's anger surged. He gave up on using the item and began to chant. Draping the true red battle armor over his body, the destructive fire of calamity churned in his palm. Forging the giant sword into a new shape, the sound of the chiming was like an epitaph: cleave the divine court, forge the stars. Platinum tier fire elemental spell, Vermilion Nova. A red dot soared from his finger and into the sky. A closer look revealed that it was not a red dot but a space that had collapsed to the extreme. Then the whole collapsed, and endless flames shot out from within it and burned the entire sky into ashes. The ice on the Dragonspine Snow Mountain, which had not melted all year round, quickly melted to reveal the bare black rocks underneath it. There was a sea of fire above his head. As his feet took a step forward, dragon-shaped flames wrapped around his torso. It made him look like a fire god that had descended into the world. His eyes flashed a dark crimson light, and he pointed at Watson. The sea of fire that covered the sky poured down instantaneously and transformed into a pillar of fire that coiled around Watson. Sylvan, what are you doing? You activated your strongest self-created platinum tier spell, Vermilion Nova. Do you want to kill Watson? He is the astrologer's expression changed. Sylvan interrupted him before he could finish. I know, Master. That's why I want him to understand what it means to be obedient. Vermilion Nova was a spell that he created by simulating the explosion of a star. The temperature of the flames exceeded 10,000 degrees Celsius. Even a diamond tier elite's body would melt if they stood still and let it burn. He had used all of his strength in that spell. If Watson were willing to give in, he would withdraw 50% of his force. He promised that he would only make Watson miserable and not let him die. He wanted Watson to face the harsh reality. There was a stark difference between a platinum tier elite like him and a veteran platinum tier elite like Sylvan. Sylvan almost smiled when he saw the flames enveloped Watson's body. At that moment, a tender voice came from within the fire. Absolute zero. The flames that had filled the sky were suddenly extinguished. Watson had escaped unscathed. His body emitted an aura that could stop time. Even the air solidified into ice crystals and rushed toward Sylvan. Chapter 195, You Can Be Proud of Yourself. Absolute Zero was a platinum tier ice elemental spell, and it was not only that. The essence of the spell was to control magical elements, it used space and time to freeze them. It was considered a fusion spell because the golden flash had that spell. Therefore, Watson was very familiar with it. You mastered a high-tier spell? Absolute zero. Sylvan seemed a little surprised. Watson, he thought, was already excellent enough to be on the verge of platinum at that age. He had not expected Watson to be so knowledgeable about platinum-tier spells. He had underestimated his adversary. Unfortunately, he did not realize it until it was too late. Sylvan extended his right hand toward Watson. The dragon-shaped flames around his body immediately flew in the direction of Watson in an attempt to stop the cold air's approach. Unfortunately, it was useless. The thick and long fire dragon flew more than 10 meters in front of Watson before it began to collapse and shrink. The flames had weakened. It was only the size of a hand when it came in front of Watson, and the boy blew on it. Kaka, kaka. The sound of freezing rang out, and the ice permanently trapped the flames. Who had ever a flame that encased in ice? The fire that was no longer burning was like a work of art in the center of the ice block. Cold breath spewed from his mouth. Watson's hair and brows were encrusted with frost. His body could not endure that even as a gold-tier warrior. Even as a spellcaster, he had ended in such a state. Sylvan, who was in the middle of the attack, was in an even worse predicament. A layer of frost had formed on his garments and limbs before the flame on his body was extinguished. He gritted his teeth. That forced Sylvan to retreat rapidly. He enhanced the transfer of the magical power, but it was still ineffective in slowing the spread of ice on his body. Wait, Watson, let's pause that battle for a moment. Lord Sylvan, you initiated the conflict, and now you want to stop it. Don't you think you talk too much? Unfortunately, I do not intend to quit until the winner is determined. I recently learned a platinum-tier fusion spell, and I'll let you test its power. Silver Moon of Endless Reincarnation. Watson chanted a difficult and mysterious language. It was not the present-day language but a language from 10,000 years ago, the lone language. No one in the room understood it. They could only sense the power in those words. The language was swift and smooth, and Watson quickly completed the spell. The sky's original flaming red tint faded and was replaced with a silver-white color. An enormous illusory moon that spanned for hundreds of meters appeared in the midst of the silver-white light. Sylvan's movements were slowed when the moonlight gathered into a pillar and surrounded him. The moon was clearly visible at the foot of the dragon-spine snow mountain. Sylvan's body was encased in frost, and the ice on his body swiftly thickened at that instant, thanks to the illusory moonlight. He had turned into an ice sculpture before he could resist it. He looked lifelike inside the ice sculpture as he maintained his escape posture. What? Lord Sylvan lost? Nightingale opened her mouth wide as she gazed at Sylvan's ice sculpture. She wished she could say something, but she could not. She felt a chill in her spine, and her thoughts became foggy. It was difficult to think. The moon in the sky seemed to have dragged her spirit away. The majority of the shadow guards were like that as well. The moonlight shone not only on Sylvan but on everyone in the room. The light engulfed everyone, magical beasts and the astrologer alike, and their ability to think and move had been reduced. The astrologer was the first to lift the restriction. A layer of brilliant starlight was found on his body, and it obstructed the moonlight in the sky. He flashed in front of Watson and stared at him strangely. Watson felt goosebumps all over his body. Master, why are you looking at me like that? Watson, you know the lone language from 10,000 years ago, and you even know how to use it to chant a spell. I have studied the lone language for a long time, but even I could not do that. How did you learn to do that? He was the most knowledgeable mage in the kingdom. How could Watson know something that even he did not know? The lone language was distinct from their language then. It was a powerful language. A spell cast in that language was more powerful than a typical spell. That had something to do with the essence of magic, which by nature, sought resonance with the world through its own magical elements and the manner it was chanted. The language was merely a vehicle for resonance. The degree of resonance between various languages and the world varied. For example, dragon language magic, unique to the dragon race, was far more potent than the magic that humans had mastered. That was because the dragon language was older, more mysterious, and more powerful than human language. The lone language was one of the most powerful of all languages. After all, that was the tongue in which the gods previously conversed. Unfortunately, it was too old, and most of the language was lost. Aside from the language, the astrologer was shocked by the platinum tier spell that Watson had unleashed. He had not taught Watson such a potent spell. Perhaps Sylvan had done that? The astrologer turned to face Sylvan and promptly discarded that notion. Sylvan was frozen. How could it have gotten so bad if he had taught Watson that? Master, from whom did you learn the lone language? I accidentally learned it while I was gazing at the content on the ruins' walls. Accidentally, those words stung the astrologer. He held his forehead and sighed. All right, let's just take it as what it is. He might not have trusted Watson a few days earlier, but after he saw what Watson had done, he no longer had any qualms about that. His apprentice was a brilliant student who could learn everything in an instant. He had even figured things out by looking at the lone language. Was there an issue with that? That kind of language has an enormous impact on the development of magic in the kingdom. I need to find an opportunity to ask Watson for the complete version of the language. The astrologer made up his mind and immediately felt a little emotional. He had not taught Watson in a few days, and then he had to learn from his disciple. He was not a qualified master. Master, we can talk about the runes later. Let's solve the problem in front of us first. I just learned the spell to freeze the border count. I'm not very familiar with it, so I can't undo it. Do you have a solution, Master? Watson's voice interrupted his thoughts. When he looked up, he noticed Watson pointing to the frozen Sylvan nearby. He looked a little uncomfortable, as if he was worried that Sylvan would die. On the one hand, he wanted to test the spell that he had just learned. On the other hand, he felt that the border count was too powerful, so he did not hold back. He did not expect he could freeze the man so easily. According to the Silver Moon of Endless Reincarnations description, the moon in the sky would absorb Sylvan's soul and become stronger. It would be weird if he accidentally killed Sylvan. Don't worry about him. He is not that weak, the astrologer said indifferently. Yes, I am not that weak to be killed by a child. The voice came from behind him. Watson's pupils contracted. He turned around and found a slender hand in front of his eyes. It quickly enlarged, and a finger tapped on his forehead heavily. With a muffled sound, Watson took more than 10 steps backward. He felt his mind go blank, and his soul was about to be separated from his body. Watson, this is payback for the spell you cast on me. If I did not know the time-stripping spell, that attack might have injured me. The only person on the entire border who can force me to that extent is you, Watson. You can be proud of yourself. Watson struggled to shake his head. He raised his head to see Sylvan standing in front of him. His purple hair had become white and had a faint glow. Even though his lashes and brows had assumed the color of light, they twisted upward in a way that defied gravity. The absolute zero spell that sealed Sylvan had already turned into a sea of ice fragments. Chapter 196, Why did you destroy the ruins? The border count also knew the time-stripping spell? That spell was the reason he lost to an astrologer the last time. Sylvan's time-stripping spell appeared to be on par with the astrologer's spell, if not stronger than that. Under the pure white body, there was a power that was hundreds of times stronger than before. That power made him shudder from the bottom of his heart. Phew! Nightingale, who was on the sidelines watching the battle, exhaled a sigh of relief. She felt relieved. She had foreseen Lord Sylvan to lose, but as expected, Lord Sylvan's might would not be conquered so easily. It seemed like the scenario had reversed. Watson's strength was not insignificant. He had forced Sylvan, who was the strongest mage in the kingdom, to that extent. That kid was not even comparable to her a few months ago, but it seemed like he had progressed to such a level. Nightingale sighed, it was what she had expected of the border count's child. He had good genes. She was there when the astrologer and Sylvan discussed whether Watson was his illegitimate child. She heard Lord Sylvan acknowledge Watson's identity, so she stood by and watched the battle as it progressed. She did not stop it. It was a father-son showdown, so she did not interfere. Watson, the battle is over. If you admit your mistake now and give me the rights to explore the ruins, I'll let it go. After he entered the time-stripping spell state, Sylvan's voice overlapped, as if countless of himself spoke simultaneously. Who said I lost? Watson put down the hand that was rubbing his forehead and clenched his fists. What other trump cards do you have? Do you want to cast the time-stripping spell like I did? I advise you not to waste your energy. Among all the spells Sylvan had mastered, the time-stripping spell had the most significant strength. The only spell that could withstand it was the same time-stripping spell. At the same time, that also had the highest cost to pay. The time-stripping spell would force him to weaken himself to take power from his past self constantly. In other words, it would take time to accumulate. He had stayed dormant at the border for 10 years to nurture that spell. He could only summon a maximum of 3,000 of his past selves. How old was Watson? How many past selves could he obtain when he was only 10 years old? How could he compare to him? With that thought in mind, Sylvan noticed Watson take a deep breath and begin to chant the spell in Lone. Watson had tasted the sweetness after he tried to cast the spell in the Lone language. Watson's body condensed a layer of time aura as the spell formed. It was a prelude to the release of the time-stripping spell, but it was not exactly the same. When Sylvan noticed the long river above Watson's head, he attempted to figure out what was unusual. It was the long river of time, and he could see the ancient castle ruins and shifting mountains and rivers in the distance. More than 20 people walked out of the long river of time slowly. They looked like Watson, and their bodies had a platinum tier aura as they arrived at Watson's side. This is time stripping? What kind of spell is this? Sylvan was dumbfounded. Time stripping was a spell that would fuse one's past selves into one's body, but the spell that Watson had used summoned his past selves instead. While he was puzzled about that, Watson brought more than 20 identical copies of himself and rushed at him. At the same time, he spread his arms, and the world tree branches flew out one by one and broke into wooden cards. The starlight that fused with the sky turned into golden cards. There were 24 people there. Watson had created 24 cards and fused them into each of them. He cast the God's Descent spell, and the clones immediately turned into mythical creatures. There was a god who carried a scepter and wore a garment full of eyes, which symbolized the fool. There was also a high-tier being who personified travel and lightning, he was known as Hermes. There was also a war god on a golden chariot and an angel with wings on his back, he held a horn in one hand and a long sword in the other. Watson's projection of the river of time had the potential to pull his previous selves out of the gaps in history, but it had a weakness. His past selves could not carry any tools, so Watson used his original body to create the golden cards and gave his doppelgangers the ability to cast the God's Descent spell. Then, he activated the Great Sin Mask, which had been fused with the World Tree's shadow. Roar! A deafening roar erupted. Watson's body was engulfed in black gas, which ballooned as if it were inflating. It grew into a massive black whale with a length of hundreds of meters. It had spikes on its back and a long snake-shaped tail that swayed behind it. It had huge fangs on its abdomen and mouth. The sharp fangs dissolved the snow-covered ground and turned it into a quicksand vortex. That was Leviathan, the Envy Beast and a Great Sin Beast. It could force equality and shadow clones. The moment the 24 mythical creatures and the Great Sin Beast appeared, the base of the dragon-spine snow mountain boiled. Hundreds of thousands of magical beasts felt the pressure in their souls and knelt in unison. Then the shadow guards, including Nightingale, knelt too. That was the bloodline's repression. The magical beast and mythical creatures in front of them were superior to them. That must be Leviathan, the envy beast. People said that it often roams the sea and could control tsunamis. It's a terrifying magical beast. I don't know the creatures around it, but judging from their aura, they must be comparable to the great sin beast. How can a person turn into so many monsters? What kind of magic is that? A few shadow guards knelt on the ground, their voices trembled when they spoke. They had experienced great storms, but they were still shocked by that scene. They were no match for any of the monsters that Watson had turned into, and there were 24 of those beasts. It was no surprise. Watson's combat strength was already at its peak when he combined a peak platinum tier spell and tool. Roar! Watson, who had transformed into the magical beast Leviathan, roared again. A massive vortex suddenly appeared beneath Sylvan's feet. Countless shadow arms reached out from within to wrap around him. It gradually weakened the powerful aura that his body emanated. That was the envy beast's forced equality skill. It could force his opponent down to his skill level. Interesting. Sylvan's attitude changed as he stared at the 25 gigantic monsters of various shapes and sizes in front of him. Instead, things took a severe turn. Since that's the case, I won't hold back any longer. Come out now, peak platinum tier fusion spell, super elemental giant summon. The vortex beneath his feet vanished as soon as he spoke, and the shadow's arms shattered. The ground continued to churn in its position, and enormous giant rock golems climbed up one by one. They towered over 100 meters above the ground, they even blocked the sun's rays. Other than the rock golems, there were lava golems as well. Hot lava flowed on their body as the smaller rocks on them whirled in the green storm. They were not connected. At least 50 elemental giants sprang from the ground and crashed with Watson's transformed behemoth. A violent storm was formed by the collision of roughly 100 platinum-tier beasts. The ring-shaped wind, which had shattered rocks, flames, and frost, dispersed in all directions. Cracks appeared on the ground soon after, and Dragonspine Snow Mountain next to them was plagued with holes as well. The entire world seemed to be in the grip of an apocalypse. A massive rock golem hugged a mythical creature with 8 limbs and 3 heads on its back. A storm giant and a mythological creature with dense and enormous wings on its back were fighting. They conjured thunderstorms of their own. Sylvan and Watson were in the thick of the battlefield. Sylvan embedded himself inside the body of a giant rock golem and engaged in combat with the Leviathan, the envy beast that Watson had transformed into. The ground beneath them sank a few centimeters. They fought and conversed at the same time. "Do you notice the difference between you and me, Watson? I must say that you are quite gifted, but that is all. I will reiterate what I already said. I will forgive you as long as you admit your mistake." "Border count, what are you talking about? I don't understand at all. Is there a difference between us? I can't feel it anyway." "Do you really dare say that? I'll teach you a good lesson today." Following that, continuous sounds of collisions were heard. Those two guys are father and son, indeed. They're really cut from the same mold. They can get so angry in a fight. Nightingale and a couple of shadow guards were in front of the astrologer. He looked up at the sky as he flipped his right palm to release a layer of protective shield for them. "Stop fighting. The surrounding terrain will be damaged as a result of your battle. It will not be beneficial to anyone if the ruins are destroyed." Crack! Almost as soon as he finished his words, the astrologer saw a crack in the ancient ruins in front of him. The Leviathan behemoth that Watson had transformed into was pressed onto the Dragonspine Snow Mountain by the giant rock golem controlled by Sylvan. That happened to be the location of the ruins. D****. I knew that your fight would destroy the ruins. Those ruins are from 10,000 years ago. The words, items, and even a stone in there are all treasures. Do you know how much value you will lose if you destroy it?" The astrologer looked at the Dragonspine Snow Mountain with heartache. He used a spell to amplify his voice. However, it seemed that they did not hear what he had said. Watson and Sylvan fought even more fiercely. At that time, it was Watson's turn to wave Leviathan's thick and long tail. The giant rock golem's neck snapped before it was thrown onto the wall of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. It added 2 new cracks to the ruins. I told you to stop fighting. Did you not hear me? You're destroying the ruins. When the astrologer saw that the ruins were about to be destroyed, he grew enraged and cast the time-stripping spell. His body was imbued with a diamond tear aura, it gave him a youthful and attractive appearance. Then he stomped his foot, and it caused the earth to crumble around him. Whether it was Watson's clone or Sylvan's summoned giant, they all vanished into thin air among the tremors. The ruins on the walls of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain also disappeared with them. The ruins could not endure the collapse because they had been devastated for an extended period and then were subjected to such intense vibrations. Snowflakes and broken rocks pelted the ground. When the astrologer glanced at his masterpiece, his angry expression froze. Meanwhile, Watson and Sylvan deactivated their transformations at the same time and looked in his direction. They had strange expressions on their faces as they spoke in unison. Master, why did you destroy the ruins? Chapter 197, Mass-producing the wish for the world ring. Who destroyed the ruins? The astrologer snorted coldly. Which one of you saw me destroy the ruins? He had simply wished to halt Watson and Sylvan's battle, but he had not controlled his power well enough, so it caused the ruins to collapse. Who could blame him? He would not have stood up to stop it if it had not been for the fight between Watson and Sylvan. Nothing would have happened if he had not stood up to stop them. He would not have lost his cool if the ruins were fine. In a nutshell, it was not his fault. Master, at this point, it seems too late for you to explain yourself. Sylvan had a helpless look on his face. The astrologer's expression became solemn as he heard his remarks. Sylvan, are you saying that this was my fault? Just because you are the border count and have great power, do not assume you can accuse me arbitrarily. You will always be the little boy who dragged his sister from the forest of eternity and came to live in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. I dare not. Sylvan's face became gloomy. The effects of the time-stripping spell on his body faded swiftly, and his body, which was emitting white light, gradually returned to its natural color. He did not dare to forget the astrologer's kindness, so he did not intend to continue to say anything, whether the astrologer had done it or not. That's right. The astrologer, who had transformed into a handsome man, flashed a bright smile that was enough to entice thousands of girls. At that moment, a young voice echoed from nearby Sylvan. Master, it is obvious that you were the one who demolished those ruins. Don't even get started on the eyes. It is even visible through my nose. The astrologer's smile froze when he heard those remarks. When Sylvan turned around, he realized that the person who had spoken was Watson. His expression was somewhat pitiful. As the astrologer's former disciple, he was fully aware of his teacher's admiration for him. If he enraged the astrologer, he would undoubtedly suffer his rage. Watson, I'll give you another chance. Are you sure that I destroyed the ruins? The astrologer's face looked grave, and his voice was low. Sylvan's heart thumped. He thought that the astrologer was furious. I am pretty convinced you destroyed the ruins, Master. Those 10,000-year-old ruins belonged to Black Moon Castle. Since you destroyed it, it is equal to destroying our property. We must get compensation. Watson's comments were loud and forceful. When Sylvan heard that, he subconsciously covered his face and shook his head a few times. Watson, what compensation do you want? Now that the ruins are destroyed, it's impossible for you to restore them, Master. I can only rely on myself. I'll use the wish for the world ring. I can still make a wish today. I can make a wish to restore the ruins if you allow me to use your lifespan, Master. He wanted to use the astrologer's lifespan? Sylvan's mouth was wide open. Watson's request was becoming increasingly ludicrous to him. He would be enraged if he heard such a request, let alone the astrologer. However, the astrologer was not as enraged as he had anticipated. Instead, he wore a skeptical face. "Well, how many years of my life do you intend to squander away? I feel that 100 years is enough to repair the ruins. If it's not enough, I'll let you decide. Watson, even though I am immortal, I will grow old with time. When I grow old, my legs will not be as good, and my teeth will fall out. At the same time, I will suffer from insomnia and dreams. Do you have the heart to let your master suffer like that?" When the astrologer heard that he would have to pay with more than 100 years of his life, he said, "I know that losing the ruins is not a small matter to you, so I apologize. Since you have mastered the loan language, we don't need those ruins. When I go back, I will teach you 3 magic spells every week as compensation. How about that? At least 4. Watson extended 4 fingers, and the astrologer nodded obediently. "Okay, 4. What had happened? Sylvan was hypnotized. He expected the astrologer to be angry, but the truth surprised him. Why did the astrologer chastise him when he responded respectfully? Watson, on the other hand, was treated with respect when he criticized the astrologer. Why was there such a disparity in their treatment? Before he could respond, he heard Watson say, "In addition to teaching me 4 magic spells every day, I also want the border count to give me the remaining 5 Nibelung rings as compensation. He is partly to blame for the destruction of the ruins too. Then, I can make a wish with the rings. That way, I might be able to repair the damage. Okay, I can agree to that request." The astrologer hurriedly nodded and looked at Sylvan after hearing that the ruins could be restored. "What are you waiting for, Sylvan? Give him the Nibelung rings. In any case, Watson had fused your original rings. Why don't you give him the rest since they are no longer useful to you?" "Master, are you serious?" Sylvan's mouth opened wider. "Do you think I'm joking with you?" The astrologer waved his hand impatiently. "Sylvan, just because you're the border count and have great power, do not think that you can reject my orders so easily. In my eyes, you'll always be the little boy who brought his sister out of the Forest of Eternity and came to live in the Holy Dragon Kingdom." "What?" Sylvan wanted to curse, but unfortunately, it was hard to disobey his master's orders. He could only endure the unwillingness and give the 5 Nibelung rings to Watson. "Here, these are the remaining rings. Even though I don't know what you're going to do, but... Lord Sylvan, don't worry. I'll use these 5 rings properly." Watson smiled as he took the 5 rings. The 24 World Tree branches appeared in his palm. They broke into golden cards and fused with the ring as he activated the system fusion. Then, a brand new ring appeared in Watson's hand. The effect was the same as the previous one. Watson placed the ring on the middle finger of his right hand and slowly twisted it. He was satisfied with the ring in his hand. Producing 2 sets of astrology tarot cards in a single day had quickly depleted his energy, it even shook the source of chaotic elemental magic in his body. His face was pale, yet he was in a pleasant mood. The 2 wish for the world rings meant he could make 6 wishes a day. If only there were more such rings, Watson thought regretfully. If he could wear a wish for the world ring on every finger, he did not even have to fight anyone. He just had to make a wish to make his enemy suffer from a sudden illness or be crushed to death by a passing meteor. If only there were a way to duplicate the wish for the world rings, or if there were more than 10 Nibelung rings. Wait. Watson had a thought. A light flashed in his mind. He seemed to have grasped onto something. "Master, get ready. I'm going to make a wish." "Okay, you can start." The astrologer waved his arm, indicating that he was ready. "I'm going to make a wish and get 5 more Nibelung rings." Was he not going to make a wish to restore the ruins? The astrologer was patiently waiting for Watson to rebuild the ruins. His demeanor changed abruptly when he heard the unexpected wish. Then his face, which had become attractive after he used the time-stripping spell, began to age quickly. He returned to his old appearance and exclaimed, "Watson, you little b*****, lied to me again. I knew you could not repair the ruins like that. Congratulations, Master, for realizing the wish. The price is 500 years of the lifespan of a man named Antonio." 5 identical Nibelung rings appeared in Watson's hand. "My second wish is to restore all my physical strength. This wish is relatively simple. It will only consume 10 years of Antonio's lifespan." Watson's body glowed with light as his wish was granted, and he felt energized. He immediately extended a world tree branch, fashioned it into a golden card, and fused it with the ring he had obtained from the wish. It became the third wish for the world ring. "It works." Watson could not help but smile smugly as he held the ring in his fingers. He could not cheat with the wish for the world ring, he could not ask for another 100 wishes, nor could he make a direct copy of it. The ring could only grant wishes, so its copy would not have the same ability. However, it was a different case for the Nibelung rings. 10 Nibelung rings would grant him the ability to make a wish, and Watson wanted 5 of those. It would not lead to any paradox in producing wish items or the number of wishes made. Watson's eyes brightened when he discovered the method for mass-producing that item. The first thing that came to his mind was that if everyone in Black Moon Castle had such a ring, he pondered how powerful Black Moon Castle would become if that were the case. 1 wave of wishes could double the resources of Black Moon Castle. The second wish could quadruple their resources, and so on. With those rings, their resources would multiply rapidly, like locusts breeding their young. "I'm rich." Of course, there were flaws in that plan. After all, the duplicated Nibelung rings were platinum tier items. It would require 500 years of the astrologer's lifespan. If too many rings were duplicated, the astrologer might become old and weak due to the rapid loss of lifespan, and that was something Watson did not want to see. He loved his master very much, so he decided to make fewer rings for the time being. "I want to make a wish. First, make me 100 Nibelung rings." "Congratulations, Master, for the fulfillment of your wish. That wish will consume 10,000 years of the lifespan of a man named Antonio." Chapter 198, The Changes in the Ruins. Watson's palm glowed with light as the notification rang in his head, and 100 rings appeared in an instant. "I want to make a wish to recover all my strength." Watson made that wish without hesitation and began to use the world tree branches to construct golden cards to merge with the Nibelung rings. Watson would need 24 cards for every 5 Nibelung rings he fused. At the same time, he had to make a wish to regain his strength, which would exhaust 10 years of the astrologer's lifespan. When he successfully fused 100 Nibelung rings into 20 wish for the world ring during that cycle, he had already used up 20,200 years of the astrologer's lifespan. The 20 rings emitted dazzling starlight. Watson wore 8 of them on his remaining fingers, so there were still 12 rings available. He picked one out and handed it to Sylvan after some deliberation. "Lord Sylvan, I couldn't have created these rings without the Nibelung rings that you've given me. In return, I shall give you this ring. We don't owe each other anything." Sylvan took the ring and carefully examined it. He found that the ring's ability was as Watson had said, indeed. It could make 3 wishes, and each wish would only cost half the price. That was the first time he had seen Watson fuse a platinum tier item. He did not know what that ability was, but it had shocked him. Sylvan's focus shifted from the wish for the world ring to Watson. How could it be easier to master the wish for the world than to mentor Watson? If he could mentor Watson, then he could master an endless stream of wish for the world rings. Sylvan decided to look for an opportunity to ask Watson to see if he could find out how to fuse platinum tier items. He had not paid much attention to Watson when he had heard that he could fuse weapons and spells because the items he fused were all silver and gold tier items. That level of material would not be of much help to him. However, it was different for platinum tier items. While he was thinking, Watson had brought the remaining 11 rings to Nightingale and the others and began to distribute the rings. While he considered that, Watson arrived with the remaining rings and distributed them to Nightingale and the others. "Sven, this ring is yours. You've contributed a lot to the exploration of the ruins these few days, so this ring is your reward. You have to work harder in the future to get more rewards." "Thank you, young Master Watson. I will definitely devote my life to you and Black Moon Castle in the future." Sven held his breath. He appeared ecstatic after he accepted the ring. He was merely a silver tier warrior, but he possessed a platinum tier item. He had informed Watson everything he knew about the ruins and brought them to the Misty Forest, as planned. "I'll give the second ring to Miss Nightingale." Watson generously handed a wish for the world ring to Nightingale and put it on her index finger. He smiled and said, "I hope you will come to Black Moon Castle as a guest in the future, Miss Nightingale." Watson was very close to Nightingale. After all, she had helped train the Black Moon Knights with a lot of effort in the past. As for the remaining rings, Watson muttered. He felt the eager eyes of the shadow guards beside Nightingale. As he heard their gulps, he deliberately put the rings away. "I won't give them to you for now. If you can help me with the exploration of the ruins, maybe I'll give you one when I'm in a good mood." Those shadow guards were the border count's subordinates, so it meant more to stay by his side to monitor him. He wanted to change that situation and get the approval of those people. "Don't worry, young Master Watson. We will help you explore more ruins to your satisfaction." The group of shadow guards began to roll up their sleeves. Initially, they were only loyal to the border count, but now they decided to help Watson on the basis of their loyalty to the border count. They could not resist the temptation of the platinum tier item in front of them. "All right, the rings have been distributed. I'm going to start repairing the ruins." Watson was delighted with the reactions of the shadow guards in front of him. At that moment, a weak voice echoed from not far away from him. "Watson, you stinky brat, what about me? You used me to create so many platinum tier items. Don't you intend to give me some compensation?" The one who spoke was the astrologer. His body was hunched, and his appearance was much older than before that. His hair was sparse, and his teeth were loose. There were also many age spots on his face. "Of course, I won't forget you, Master. I prepared a big gift for you a long time ago." Watson chuckled and opened his right hand, which was filled with rings. "I want to make a wish. I wish for my master to return to his youth. I'm willing to pay the price with 8 wish to the world rings." "Master, it is not possible to fulfill your wish. You will need to consume at least 10 wish to the world rings. Then, use 2 more rings. Congratulations, your wish has been fulfilled." Following the voice in his mind, cracks appeared on the 8 rings that Watson had put away, as well as the rings on his 2 thumbs. All of them shattered with a cracking sound and turned into ashes. At the same time, an invisible force enveloped the astrologer's body, causing his sparse hair to become thick. The deep wrinkles on his face gradually softened, and his turbid eyes became clear. In the blink of an eye, he had transformed from an old man to a young man in his 20s. His platinum hair flickered with a faint luster, and his handsome face was enough to charm thousands of girls. His hunched body had straightened too. The astrologer had looked the same as when he had cast the time-stripping spell. He was not young for a short period, but his appearance was fixed for a long time. He raised his hand and looked at his slender and pale fingers, and his arms were lean too. The astrologer was speechless. "Master, I have been meaning to tell you something. When you led the Mage Guild to attack Black Moon Castle, I agreed to be your disciple on the surface, but I actually hated you. However, after seeing your selflessness these past few days, I believe that you do see me as your disciple. In return, I have to do something. I didn't know what I can do to please you, but I have an idea now." Watson bowed to the astrologer and thanked him sincerely. "Perhaps allowing you to return to your youth is the greatest way to repay you, Master." If 10 rings were not enough, I am prepared to shatter all the rings on my finger. That would fulfill my wish. Fortunately, 10 rings had sufficed. Thank you very much, Master. Thank you for your time and effort. He had deceived the astrologer many times over the past few days. Not only did he want to obtain benefits, but he also wanted to see if the astrologer would be angry or if he were sincere toward him. He knew that there was no need to continue testing the old man. The young astrologer looked at Watson with a helpless and gentle gaze. Antonio. What? Don't call me Lord Astrologer, call me Antonio. Antonio rubbed the corners of his eyes, and his fingertips were a little wet. Antonio is my real name. It's too strange to have you call me Lord Astrologer. Just like how you sincerely regarded me as your master, Watson, you are also the most outstanding disciple I have taught in my life. There was no one better than you in the past, and I don't think there will be any in the future. In the beginning, he had only taken Watson as his disciple because of his talent, and he saw a shadow of someone else in Watson. However, his heart was touched when he heard Watson's words. It turned out that Watson had given him some serious considerations. He did not give the astrologer the wish for the world ring because he wanted to help the astrologer regain his youth. He had never been married or had children, but he felt that his children would look like Watson. He did not know if it was because he was old, but Antonio felt like crying. I understand. Lord. Master Antonio. Watson nodded. Since you have become young again, can I continue to use your lifespan to replenish those broken rings, Master? After all, to restore your lifespan, 2 of the rings on my hand are now broken. Restoring Antonio's lifespan took only 10 rings, and his lifespan could create 20 rings. That was consistent with the input-output of a relationship. There would be more things as long as it was continuously depleted. You little b*****, I was moved for nothing. So, helping me restore my youth was not a gift at all, but rather, you wanted to use more of my lifespan. Do you know that repeatedly using up one's life is the cruelest punishment in the world? Are you trying to torture me to death? Antonio frowned and glared at Watson. However, his anger was not enough. As soon as he finished speaking, he and Watson looked at each other and laughed simultaneously. Sylvan stood in the distance and watched that scene. He wanted to say something, but in the end, he moved his lips and did not say anything. His eyes flickered with envy. When he and Antonio had become master and disciple, they had always maintained a respectful relationship. Even though Antonio was very good to him, he could still feel the distance. It was nothing like what Antonio and Watson had, a noisy but good relationship. Perhaps Antonio did not want a disciple who was respectful to him. Instead, he wanted a family member who would stand up and criticize him when he was wrong, accompany him when he was sad, and occasionally act coquettishly with him to ask for benefits. That was the difference between him and Watson, and it was also the reason Antonio's attitude toward the 2 of them was completely different. Crack! Sylvan was still lamenting when a shattering sound caught his attention. He turned around and saw a force had shaken the shattered pieces of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. Then something rustled from within the mountain. It was as if something terrifying was about to burst out of it. Chapter 199, The Experiment at the Snowy Mountain Peak. The changes in the ruins rapidly drew the attention of everyone there. Broken stones were continually flung out of the crumbling ruins. A sinister black aura lingered around them, and the rocks that were covered by it plummeted into the snow. In no time, a deep pit appeared in the snow. The black aura had initially seeped out from the ruins' debris, but it swiftly drilled out from other places. It joined and clung to the summit of Dragonspine Snow Mountain, turning the previously snow-white mountain peak black. That black atmosphere seems to have emptied the entire Dragonspine Snow Mountain. Sylvan, what did you do to the ruins? Antonio, who was in his 20s again, turned around and looked at Sylvan. His voice was gentle and pleasant. Master, I did not do anything. Sylvan shook his head in response to seeing Antonio in such a state. It's best if that's the case. Watson places a high value on that ruin. I will let you get punished if you do anything to trigger changes in the ruins. Sylvan was dumbstruck. Sylvan took a deep breath. When had he ever felt so betrayed as a border count? However, the person in front of him was Antonio. He could not offend him, regardless of his strength or identity. He already knew why Antonio was good toward Watson, and he only wanted to say one thing. There was nothing wrong with Antonio liking Watson, but could he treat Sylvan a little better? After all, he was Watson's supposed father. How could he punish the father for the sake of the child? How did the Dragonspine Snow Mountain turn black? What's with that black aura? Why do I feel dizzy just by looking at it? Be on alert. There seemed to be many magical beasts appearing on the peak of the mountain. Some of the shadow guards bowed their heads as if they were in pain. One of them raised his head to look at the sky and cried out in surprise. Everyone raised their heads to look at the top of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain, as directed by the horrified shadow guards. It spanned an unknown number of kilometers and an unknown height. Suddenly, a veil of colorful light erupted at the top of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain and descended quickly. A closer examination revealed that the light was the combat aura from a slew of powerful magical beasts. At the very least, they were bronze tier, and among them, there was no lack of powerful silver and gold tier magical beasts too. The vibrations triggered an avalanche while the magical beasts were running. The snow lines that covered the sky collapsed, and the avalanche's speed could only catch up to those bronze tier magical beasts. The majority of the magical beasts had fled before the avalanche happened. The magical beast's leader was a massive silver-white wolf with 12 wings on its back. It was several dozen meters long. Its eyes were blood red, and it wore a crescent-shaped insignia on its brow. Something had wounded its right ear. It had an odd gap. Why are there so many magical beasts on Dragonspine Snow Mountain? Watson was astounded to see the mystical beasts descending from the mountain's peak. He used the technique to identify the magical beasts' data. There were around 1 million of them, and they were generally stronger than the magical beasts in the Misty Forest. He thought he had practically fused all of the magical beasts in the Misty Forest the previous week. He had not anticipated seeing so many of them on Dragonspine Snow Mountain. Even silver-tier magical beasts with wings would struggle to soar to the Dragonspine Snow Mountain's height. Flying would be impossible due to the intense cold and thin air. Did those magical beasts climb up the mountain? Watson promptly dismissed that notion, knowing full well that it was much more improbable. After sweeping through the horde of magical beasts, his eyes were drawn toward the silver-white wolf at the fore of all the other magical beasts. Platinum-tier magical beast, the 12-winged moon-eating sky wolf. The sky wolf was a magical beast in ancient legends. It liked to devour the moonlight. The sky wolf dwelt in a dark and foreboding realm. It was an existence that could fight against the dragon race. Due to its characteristics, very few of them were exterminated by ancient elites. Most of the magical beasts that possessed the Sky Wolf's bloodline were silver-tier silver moon magical wolves. Ability: immune to light elemental damages, high-tier physical immunity, high-tier devour, able to convert what it devours into energy, night protection, have twice the strength during the night, high-tier berserk, when life is in danger, it will enter a frenzied state and sacrifice its rationality in exchange for an increment in combat strength. Additional ability: moon reading, anyone who looks into its eyes will be pulled into an illusion, where they can be tortured and killed in the illusion. Additional skills: Platinum tier fusion spell Absolute Zero, Platinum tier ice elemental spell Eternal Ice Sealed Throne, Gold tier ice elemental spell Ice Giant Creation, Gold tier light elemental spell Extreme Cold Milky Way. Impressive attributes. Watson sighed. Such attributes were no worse than the golden flash. He was about to say something when he heard a creaking sound. He turned around to see Nightingale clenching her fists so tightly that he could hear it. Her eyes were bloodshot as she peered at the moon-eating sky wolf as it descended from the mountain's summit. That split ear. It's the same one. I'm not wrong. The Nightingale utilized a teleportation technique only available to gold-tier warriors. She vanished into the distance as she ran toward the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. Miss Nightingale, it's too dangerous. The moon-eating Skywolf was a platinum-tier magical beast. Then, there were the other high-tier magical beasts as well. If Nightingale rushed forward by herself, would she not head toward her death? Watson was anxious, he could not care about anything else. He followed Nightingale and used teleportation to catch up to her. Behind him, Antonio and Sylvan flew toward the top of the mountain as well. They did not appear to be in good shape. Sylvan, I think someone is raising those magical beasts. Do you know where they came from? Antonio's eyes flashed between gold and silver. He cast the gold-tier spell, Eye of Insight, and scanned the magical beasts that had descended upon them. He realized that those magical beasts were not wild beasts. He could see their claws and teeth were artificially polished. Their necks, limbs, and even their ears had rope burns. Only Sylvan had the ability to raise so many magical beasts on the border. Furthermore, Sylvan harbored hatred against the king, so he had the motive for raising those magical beasts. Master, do you suspect me? I don't know who raised those magical beasts either. I didn't even know that there were so many powerful magical beasts hidden in the misty forest. If those beasts had attacked us the previous year, we would have been reduced to ruins. Sylvan smiled bitterly. It was inevitable that he would be suspected. It was unreasonable that he did not know someone had nurtured so many magical beasts under his nose. However, he also did not expect that someone would do exactly that at the peak of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. That mountain separated the Holy Dragon Kingdom and the Winter Nation, it was even unlawful for one to climb it. Who would raise magical beasts there? Sylvan thought to himself. There was only one person who had such strength and was not afraid of the kingdom's laws. It is the 25th day of the 12th month of the year 221 according to the Holy Dragon calendar. A total of 108,100 researches had been done on the infinite fission spell. The purpose of the experiment was to test if we could control the infinite fission spell. However, all those tests had failed. We are unable to stop the spell once it is cast. We've used silver-tier magical beasts in the experiments, namely the gold-devouring rats. They became irrational and uncontrollable once inoculated with the spell. Every time it gorged itself, it would reproduce and promote the evolution of the gold-devouring rat, which then had the strength of a platinum-tier magical beast. I named it the Heaven-Devouring Rat Emperor. As a byproduct of the infinite fission spell, I have obtained a gold-tier medicine called the Magical Beast Evolution Fluid. It is a black liquid that will automatically liquefy into mist when the temperature is below zero. It is corrosive too. That medicine is extracted from the dead gold-devouring rat's bodily fluids. It can allow magical beasts to evolve quickly and unlock intelligence that is no weaker than that of a human. However, magical beasts that had taken that medicine will become aggressive and will probably end up dead. We've used about 2.2 million magical beasts in our experiments, and only about 1.3 million had survived the process. The estimated survival rate is 59%. To ensure the secrecy of the experiment, I used the gold-devouring ratrots to empty most of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain and threw that mysterious medicine in there. If the mountain is destroyed, then the drugs will spread, and no one at the border will be spared. A middle-aged man with purple hair and a grey-white robe sat cross-legged on the snow on the mountain peak. He held a book with dense experimental data in his hand, and a quill pen was moving on its own to record what he had said. The words composed with the quill pen were vividly red, which was unusual. Every time it finished a paragraph, the man would stick the quill pen into his arm and let it suck his blood. I swear by this platinum-tier item, the pen of truth, that what I had stated is true, he whispered to himself. There are no lies, omissions, or concealments. Stop recording. Hiss. As soon as he finished speaking, the man sucked in a breath of cold air. The quill was like a knife, it spun and stabbed a piece of flesh off his arm before it continued to drill into it. The man's arm had other similar wounds. One could vaguely see his bones from the wounds, and he covered his bleeding right hand. As he endured the pain, he continued to whisper, additional notes. That experiment and the spreading plague experiment conducted in the Broken Barons territory in the Winter Kingdom had proven to be ineffective. Both had failed to resurrect anyone. End of statement. After he finished speaking, the quill no longer moved, it landed on the ground quietly. The man picked up the quill and struggled to his feet before he closed the book with a click. The 2 experiments that lasted for 10 years have finally ended. It's time to report to His Majesty. I wonder if he has any new experiments for me, and where will I conduct them? I hope he can arrange for a more comfortable place for the experiments. My bones can't stand the cold on another snowy mountain. On the peak of the mountain, a gust of cold wind blew past, blowing his long robe, revealing a strange body underneath him. Half of it was white bones, and the other half was full of flesh and blood. The boundaries between them were clear and shocking. A rush of chilly wind blew past him on the mountain's crest. It blew on his long robe to reveal a strange form beneath the cloth. Half of it was bones, while the other half were flesh and blood. The distinctions between them were stark and shocking. Chapter 200, Advancing to the Platinum Tier. Nightingale glared at the moon-eating skywolf as they rushed down from the top of the mountain. She tried her best to teleport to the snowy mountain, and her strength sent the snowflakes on the ground flying. Pieces of memories invaded her mind. It had been 10 years. She would never forget that year's winter a silver moon wolf had killed her parents. Her parents' bloodied bodies, as well as the sounds she heard before they died, were still fresh in her mind. She would never forget the magical beast that had killed her parents. The mockery in her eyes was filled with cruelty. It can't be wrong, that moon-eating skywolf is the magical beast from back then. Nightingale gritted her teeth. Despite the fact that nearly 10 years had passed and the magical beast in front of her was a moon-eating skywolf rather than a silver moon wolf, she was certain that it was the same one that had killed her parents back then. She remembered the notch-shaped mark on the ear of that moon-eating skywolf, and she remembered very clearly the broken chain locked on the silver moon wolf's right ear. That silver moon magical wolf appeared to have been trained by someone and had escaped on its own. She had wanted to take revenge on that magical beast for so many years, and she finally had the opportunity. Hatred blinded Nightingale's eyes, and her right hand touched the dagger at her waist. The distance got closer. 3,000 meters. 1,000 meters. 500 meters. When she was about 500 meters away, Nightingale's figure suddenly disappeared from where she was. She had turned into an illusory shadow and flashed forward 5 times in a row. It drew a lightning-shaped curve. Gold tier dark elemental fighting skill, lightning shadow chain stab. That was her best fighting skill. The moment she released it, the ground was plowed into a deep ravine. Snowflakes danced in the air, and ordinary snowflakes were whisked by her fighting spirit, which contained the aura of a sharp arrow. She appeared in front of the moon-eating skywolf almost instantaneously. Nightingale was as small as an ant compared to the moon-eating skywolf, which was more than 100 meters long and more than 10 meters high. She did not, however, lose her will to battle. When her knife met with the magical beast's fur, sparkles flew, and a few snow-white hairs were shed. That was all there was to it. A few holes also emerged on her dagger. The sword only managed to cut some of its furs. Nightingale did not expect the moon-eating skywolf's body to be so tough, so she stepped back subconsciously. Roar! The moon-eating skywolf stopped moving forward and lowered its massive head in confusion. Nightingale's appearance was reflected in its bright red eyes. It stared at her for a long time, and then the confusion in its eyes faded. It opened its mouth and pulled it into a strange arc as if it was smiling. It was not only Nightingale who had recognized the wolf, it seemed like the wolf had recognized the girl in front of it too. It raised its right claw slowly and then a sharp nail before it slid toward the ground in front of Nightingale. Nightingale's face grew pale when confronted with the attack. She felt as if her power had stopped working, and her body became extremely stiff. Fear lingered in her heart, just like 10 years ago when she saw her parents die tragically, but she could do nothing. At that time, she was only a little girl, and she could not face such a powerful demonic beast like a silver moon wolf. However, things had changed. She was already a gold-tier warrior, and she still could not defeat it. Even if she used her hatred to suppress her fear, she could not stop her body from shivering in front of a higher-tier life form. She had miscalculated the moon-eating sky wolf's power, and it was too late for her to realize it. "I'm sorry, Mom and Dad, I could not avenge you. It seems like I will see you guys soon." Nightingale threw the dagger in her hand as if someone had ordered her to do that. She had trained hard for the past 10 years, and she had learned from the border count. However, all of those were meaningless then. She closed her eyes in despair. With a muffled bang, she was sent more than 10 meters backward. She spat out a mouthful of blood and felt dizzy. She felt as if her body was no longer hers. Then, more than 10 meters of snow mist rose from the ground as stones flew everywhere. That beast had the power to destroy the world with just a flick of its nails. The power of a platinum-tier magical beast was truly terrifying. After it sent Nightingale flying backward, the moon-eating sky wolf did not seem to be satisfied. Its 12 wings created a layer of air current, which continued to sweep Nightingale higher. The curve of its mouth became wider as if it wanted to watch Nightingale fall from the sky and smashed into pieces. At that moment, a shadow appeared in the sky. Watson spread the light elemental combat aura wings on his back and appeared beside Nightingale. With a wave of his hand, he shattered the storm that the moon-eating sky wolf had created. Watson scowled as he held Nightingale in his arms and gazed down at the moon-eating sky wolf. He did not know why Nightingale hated that magical beast, which led her to charge at it regardless of the difference in their strengths. He only knew that that magical beast had injured his friend, and it had smiled like a human. It looked cunning, which made him dislike it very much. The moon-eating sky wolf raised its head and looked at Watson. It sensed a threatening aura from Watson, so it was extra vigilant. It had only felt the same aura from a human once before. The image of a human that was half bone and half flesh and blood invaded its mind, and it trembled. The moon-eating sky wolf was an existence that was comparable to a dragon. However, when compared to that particular great existence, it was merely an ordinary silver moon wolf with the sky wolf bloodline. The moon-eating sky wolf was born in the misty forest more than 10 years ago, and it had been an ignorant member of the forest. One day, a demon with purple hair and a body that was only half flesh and blood had captured it. He had brought it to the top of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. The moon-eating sky wolf was not the only captured magical beast there. The demon bound them with some magic tools that weakened their strength so that he could run inhuman experiments on them every day. Sometimes, the purple-haired demon would feed them some strange black liquid. Occasionally, he would remove some of their organs and replace them with parts from other magical beasts. He would also pit them against each other. Then, he would feed their corpses to some black rats. Almost half of the magical beasts did not survive the experiment or died because of the low temperature on the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. The moon-eating sky wolf had survived by chance. There was bound to be a reward after a tragic price, and the prize was that it had become smarter. It had obtained a magical ability, Advanced Devouring. As long as it devoured, it would become stronger. The moon-eating sky wolf could eat trees, rocks, and even other magical beasts, and it would continue to evolve. Of course, the most delicious and nutritious ones were humans. A few years after it was experimented on, the purple-haired demon went out for a trip during the winter. The moon-eating sky wolf had used its advanced devouring ability to bite off the chains and followed the other magical beasts to the outside world. The moon-eating sky wolf had found a village and killed most of the people there. That was the most delicious meal it had ever had in its life. Unfortunately, a man with purple hair, who was different from the purple-haired demon, had saved the little girl. Then, it was captured again and returned to the mountain. Since it had learned how to devour, it had become a completely different existence from the other magical beasts. Over the years on the Dragonspine Snow Mountain, the moon-eating skywolf had continued to devour and evolve until it became a platinum-tier magical beast. Finally, it was released from that cage, and while it was escaping, it had run into the little girl who had escaped its clutches 10 years ago. It was another joyous occasion for the moon-eating skywolf, a reward from heaven for its escape from its predicament. It was a reward, so the moon-eating skywolf had to prepare before it would start to eat. However, the child who looked to be a little more than 10 years old had interrupted its appetite. The moon-eating skywolf considered such a child as a human larva. The boy was a protected child, so he must be more delicious than an adult. It could swallow 100 of such children in one bite. Even though the child had a dangerous aura, the moon-eating skywolf had swallowed at least a few thousand magical beasts over the years. It had won many battles, so it was quite confident. Furthermore, the more dangerous the aura, the stronger the person was. It would be an excellent tonic for the wolf. Gulp. The moon-eating skywolf stretched its long tongue and licked its wet lips. It could no longer hold its restless appetite. It immediately spread its wings and flew into the sky. At the same time, the moon-eating skywolf opened its mouth and released the advanced devouring ability. It aimed at Watson. It wanted to consume Watson first and then enjoy Nightingale's despair and fear, just like how it had swallowed Nightingale's parents in front of her many years ago. That would be very interesting. A human's fear and despair was the most delicious food for the moon-eating skywolf. The moon-eating skywolf narrowed its eyes and revealed a sadistic expression similar to that of a human. Its mouth emitted an irresistible smile as it pulled Watson closer to Nightingale. Watson had no reactions during that time and was about to be swallowed. At that moment, Watson looked at the moon-eating skywolf's wide-open mouth and stretched out his free hand to fan the front of his nose. "It stinks. It seems like you don't brush your teeth after meals. Furthermore, your roar is too loud. As a platinum-tier magical beast, you have no class and a bad temper. I had wanted to fuse you and bring you back to Black Moon Castle to expand my strength. Unfortunately, you don't meet my aesthetic standards. So, you should die here." "Die there?" The moon-eating skywolf laughed mockingly. How could the child kill it? The child was the one who should die, he was food. Suddenly, it heard the child mutter something under his breath. "Great sin beast, gluttony transformation." Immediately after that, a thick black fog appeared on the young man's body. It wrapped around him and expanded rapidly before he turned into a strange magical beast that was more than 100 meters tall. The magical beast was in the shape of a black goat. The fur on its body was condensed from the black mist, and it had no facial features on its face. One could only see its large jaws squirmed around its body at will. One could also hear the whispers of hunger and see its bright red intestines from its mouth. That magical beast faced the moon-eating skywolf, and it opened its mouth almost at the same time. The moon-eating skywolf claimed it could swallow the moon because of its wide mouth, and that was almost incomparable to the magical beast that Watson had transformed into. Watson's transformed beast's mouth overlapped with the moon-eating skywolf's mouth that was dozens of meters wide. It was at least 10 times bigger than the moon-eating skywolf's head. It could even hold 1/3 of the wolf's body. Crack! The giant maw bit off 1/3 of the moon-eating skywolf's body, including its head, with a muffled sound. Only a smooth and bloody wreckage remained, which slid back to the ground lifelessly. The black goat was a magical beast that had devoured the moon-eating skywolf. The wolf made a frightening gnawing noise as its size fluctuated between big and small until it stopped. The dark fog dispersed, and Watson, who was cradling Nightingale in his arms, reappeared. He sighed and complained. "Such a horrible taste. Also, aren't you overestimating yourself? You have clearly mastered several powerful platinum-tier spells, yet you're trying to kill me with the devouring skill. In terms of devouring platinum-tier beasts, is there anything else that can compare to gluttony? Watson's expression was calm, but his tone was authoritative. Furthermore, his body emitted an aura that surpassed his ability, a sign that showed his advancement to the platinum tier. He had been at the gold tier for a long time. Gluttony's ability was to devour everything and turn it into its own power. Since he had absorbed the moon-eating Sky Wolf's power, Watson's body and combat aura were greatly strengthened. He had already touched the threshold of the platinum tier, he was only a step away from advancing to the platinum tier.